I know we've gone back and forth a little bit in email, but your story is a very, very powerful one. I'm not sure where to start, so I'm going to, what I usually say is, I'm going to decrease and allow you to increase because of your story. I mean, it really touched me. Uh, once the our PR reps connected, and I said, "Oh my!" I said, "Yes, this is something that I not only want to hear firsthand, but I definitely want our listeners to hear firsthand." And Diane, without me leading into anything, I want to give you the floor and allow you to introduce yourself.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on the show, and I'll be happy to kind of give a brief thumbnail sketch of my story and why I wrote it, and then maybe we can go from there. Is that good with you?
Oh, that's wonderful.
Okay, super. My story starts at the age when I was divorced from my second husband. I had been married for 18 years, and like a lot of parents, um, you know, I was single. And I know that for some parents, that's a difficult thing to deal with. So, we talk about that issue at some point in time also. But I did get information from some friends who said, well, you're just too young to give up on love, and you should try online dating. You should try online dating. And I was a little hesitant, so they set me up because I'm like not into the technology stuff as much. They set me up online, and I had about a 2-year run on online dating and got very, very discouraged. If anybody's ever done it before, it's a very intense, labor intense thing. And if you look at it from a standpoint of investment, it's a low return on investment. So I was about to give up. After 2 years, I was about to give up.
Diane, I have to jump in real quick and ask you. So was it an actual service, or was it like going to a website and just entering in your information and seeing where you've matched up with someone?
Yeah, it was a website. It was a
website. Okay.
So, and just as I was about to give up, along came a handsome Frenchman who emailed me with this picture and was charming and handsome and very well mannered and very professional, and we had a lot in common, and just swept me off my feet. And, after 18 years of marriage, sometimes you forget what that feels like to be head over heels in love and starry-eyed and ooey gooey about somebody, and it just felt nice. And we fell into a relationship. We were together for a long period of time, and were looking for a house when things kind of started to go south. There had been some red flags along the way that I had chosen to ignore. And we can go into that a little bit later. But the bottom line is I caught him cheating, and I could not tolerate that kind of behavior, so we broke up. When I broke up with him, I immediately started having some health problems, which I attributed somewhat to depression because of the breakup, but also there were some issues that I found out. I had precancerous cells after my well woman visit and had to have surgery, and that concerned me because anytime somebody says cancer, it's a little serious. And I found that he had given me the human papillomavirus, which had caused the precancerous cells. So I was pretty unhappy about that, and I was worried because I knew that he had been cheating with more than one woman. And so I kind of looked around and tried to warn a couple of the ladies about making sure they get the pap smear, and that was all there was to it. That was all that I wanted to say. Just be cautious and know that this happened to me and whatnot. But one of them got concerned enough to go get tested for all the STDs, and 6 months after we broke up, I got a call from the health department. She had given the health department my name because she had gotten her diagnosis of HIV. And when the health department called me and said, you need to go in and get tested, all the mysterious symptoms that I was having for the last 6 months finally made sense to me. I had been to hematologists, I had been to the OBGYN, I had been to a rheumatologist. Nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. And when I got the diagnosis, I immediately called her, and she told me that his reaction when she talked to him was very unique. He said, you gave the health department my name? Well, everybody dies of something. Just go on and live your life.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, that's what we said. That's what we said. What? Not, oh, I'm so sorry. No, oh my gosh, I must get tested myself. Oh, where do we go from here? No, nothing. Just leave me alone. And we cried quite a bit over the phone, and we talked and we cried some more. And the more we talked and cried, the madder I got. And I decided that it was something that needed to be brought to the attention of the police, because I could almost guarantee from his reaction that he already knew that he was carrying HIV. So I did. I went to the police department and I talked to a very nice detective who was, by the way, very sympathetic and understanding. And my friend, who was also acquired HIV from him, went with me. And he said, ladies, you know, we understand that there's nothing that the prosecutor will do with this case. And I'm like, what? I jumped down in my seat. Why? I mean, this is wrong. This is clearly wrong. He said, well, you know, you can't prove it's there. You can't prove that he knew. And, you know, it could have been anyone else that I wasn't dating anybody else, but she'd been dating other people. You know, so you can't prove it's the same guy. And if you had maybe 4 women come forward or 5 women come forward, we might be able to take a look at it. So I kind of took a deep breath, and I looked at her and she looked at me, and I shrugged my shoulders and I said, okay. And I started tracking down women. And people think, how did you do this? What motivated you? You know, I just couldn't stand to have somebody out there hurting women when I knew that there was something that I might be able to do to stop it. So it was quite a roller coaster ride for the next 6 months. Talking to women who were seeing the same guy that you had been seeing is an experience that a lot of people probably wouldn't want to have. And some of them were very angry, some of them slammed the door in our face, but a lot of them were very grateful. And I actually found 3 other women besides the 2 of us who were willing to file charges. And when that happened, the prosecutor got involved. So the bottom line is he did get arrested, and we did go to trial. And he was sentenced to 45 years in prison. But the story is more about overcoming obstacles and not giving up than it is anything. And if there's any message that I want to give to the parents is to teach your children that lesson, that you never quit, you never stop.
That is so true.
Does that make sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense. And I'm told that your book is I have it listed here as a triumphant true crime story in which a diverse group of women band together in a landmark legal case against the man who deceived them all. It's Dallas Buyers Club meets Erin Brockovich. Diane, I'm like I said, I'm not sure where to start because I will mention the book is also co-authored by Jenna Glatzer. She's also an author and or ghostwriter for about 25 or so books. Diane Reid, I mean, really, really incredible, heart-wrenching story. I'm looking where to even start because I'm looking on the papers, the stuff that I prepared, and I was going to say that moment when you received that phone call, you kind of mentioned you started to connect the dots with the health issues. Was it? I mean, though it wasn't something that we would say, hey, you're able to find closure or root cause to the problem, but how was your feeling when you finally, and I want to be, I'm going to say that moment, that aha moment where you're like, I get it, I see what's happening now. What was going through your mind?
How much time do you have?
all the time in the world.
There were a range of emotions that, of course, anybody would go through when that diagnosis gets put in front of you. And it's hard to describe because it was almost a good news, bad news scenario where I had been struggling and digging and seeing doctors for months and kept getting worse and worse and more fatigued and not understanding what was wrong with me and being concerned, but nobody could find anything. And there's nothing worse than not knowing. I had somebody tell me one time that I'd rather be depressed than anxious any day. And so when I had gone through that and then I heard the diagnosis from my friend Susan, and it made sense for me too. It was the first thing I thought was, I wonder how long I have to live. I knew that I was going to die. I felt guilty because I was leaving my daughters without their mother. I thought I beat myself up terribly. Woulda, shoulda, coulda. How could I have been so stupid? Which a lot of women do. And then on the other hand, and that was the really, really bad news, but as far as the good news goes, that at least I knew. At least I knew what it was. And so it was just a range of emotions, and I curled up in a ball for days and just cried. Because everybody says your life can turn on a dime, and yes. In that case, my life turned on a dime with that phone call.
Understood. We'll get into some questions in regards to your book. I mean, I have to ask you this silly question. And the silly question is, why did you have to write this book? And I see it as the way to get this really powerful story out there. But, and that's what I usually ask most of the authors that I do interview. Your inspiration, was it more to tell the full story, tell your side of the story, to prepare other women, other loved ones out there to be careful? Give us the primary influences.
Well, there were a number of reasons. The first thing that was, and there were so many things that came together to make this story work. I call it God thing. You can call it karma or whatever, but there were a series of coincidences that if everything hadn't lined up just exactly like it did, it never would have happened. But I had been journaling the whole time because as a writer, I express my feelings better if I can get them down on paper. And so as I went through the process of trying to find the other victims and getting them to the police department and going through trial preparation and all the things that were happening, my feelings, of course, overwhelmed me a lot. So I was writing down not only how I felt, but exactly what was going on at each point in time during the time that the whole thing unfolded. but when it was over, of course, I put it aside for quite some time because I needed to heal.
Yes.
It takes a long time to kind of get your center back after being thrown off guard like that. But I kept going back to it, and I kept thinking, you know, I can do some good with this. I can help some people if I tell my story. I can help them understand that it's important to not trust everybody, that it's important to pay attention and trust your instincts. And it's also because I felt that people might be able to be inspired, hopeful, courageous because of what transpired in my life during that period of time.
So I want to, you know, and it's one of those things where, as a man, as someone that respects you, Diane, was there a sense of shame? Because I noticed, well, I mean, the media puts out there that, let's say, if there's a sexual assault survivor, that survivor goes through all different types of shame, you know, rather than looking at the person that, you know, caused this issue. I mean, your feeling amongst yourself or the sisterhood, was there that initial feel like, oh my goodness, I put myself out there, or, you know, those types of questions, did that immediately pop up, and how did you deal with that?
Oh, absolutely. The stigma was overwhelming. It wasn't just besides getting, and you know, everybody says now HIV is not a death sentence, and if there it is, if you don't know, you have it.
Right.
But if you know you have it and you get your medicines and take your medicines and adhere to them, then you can live a fairly normal life. There are some long-term issues that you have to deal with, but as far as the stigma and the shame, I was ashamed for being so stupid to be taken for a ride by this con man. And of course, it was the sexual aspect of it that was shameful, and I wasn't sure exactly how people were going to react. And the police were very sensitive to that, and they allowed us actually to use what they call pseudonyms. So
Okay.
when we wrote our statements out, we wrote our real name, but that name was not made available to anyone. We used fake names, and that helped a lot of the women come forward, because I think if they had to use their real name, they would not have been able to do that. But as a group, as a sisterhood, we all felt dirty. We felt ugly and wrong and horrible about ourselves. And there's a couple of different kinds of stigma that you experience. You may or may not experience stigma from your family or friends if you choose to disclose. And a lot of the women chose not to disclose to anyone because they were too ashamed. But there's the internal stigma as well. There's the feeling that, you know, nobody will ever want me again, and I'm bad and I'm wrong and I'm stupid and all the other things that women a lot of times do to beat themselves up. And, you know, the other part of the book that I want to tell you is that it's very, very, very important to realize that victims do get blamed. And like you were saying, especially in sexual assault cases, that
Right.
the focus of the media goes to, well, why was she wearing that short skirt? And what was she doing in an alley at 2 o'clock in the morning? And she shouldn't have been drunk. And it's her own fault because she shouldn't have gone back to that dorm with that college guy. And that is it just makes me want to get up on my soapbox and say and scream that she didn't do anything wrong. She's the victim. Don't blame the victim. In fact, when I was on Oprah, there was a lady that made some comments out of the audience. I got really mad, and I said it like 3 times. I was like, "Don't blame the victim." She said, "Well, you should use a condom." Well, if you've been with somebody and you trust them and what you think is an exclusive relationship for 4.5 years, that goes right out the window. And there were a lot of people though that were very supportive, and I struggled with whether or not to disclose my status. But as I thought through it, and we haven't talked about what I do for a living, but I go to martial arts school here in Plano, and as a martial artist, I teach courage for a living. I teach children to stand up for what's right and to do what's right, even though they might be afraid. And I thought, if I hide from this, I'm a fraud. I have to walk the walk if I'm going to talk the talk. And so when we went on 2020, I went as myself. And it was a huge risk because I didn't know if people were going to run away screaming from my school and I was going to have to close my doors. I wasn't sure what would happen. But that was what was the right thing to do. However, there was some stigma in the media. If you want to hear a really quick story,
Sure.
There were a lot of people who talked about it. It was well known in the national news, things like that. Sean Hannity made the comment on his show: "Are these women really victims, or are they deserving whores?"
Mm.
And that's the attitude of some people. Well, you deserve it. Because it's automatically assumed if you're a woman and this happens to you that you were sleeping around, and that's wrong for women to do. It's okay for a guy to be stud.
Right.
Right?
Double standards as usual.
Mm-hmm.
As usual. Oh my.
In my particular case, I had been in a monogamous relationship, and so I didn't feel that sting like, some other people might feel, but I could certainly understand it. And it's
Introducing Peacock, the new free streaming service from NBC Universal. It's hit movies, current shows, live sports, trending bits, and timeless hits. And that's why you can't not watch. Peacock. Watch for free, upgrade for more. Stream now at peacocktv.com. Law & Order SVU streaming now.
still gone.
I will say this much, with what I know of your story, that after you were divorced, X amount of years, and you started dating, and you were with this gentleman for 4.5 years. At some point, it's easy for people to say, "Oh, you should have used some type of protection." At some point, you are with someone in a monogamous relationship, that kind of goes out the window. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it just happens. It just happens. And so he was someone that you thought was Prince Charming, but turned out to be more of a nightmare.
He was Prince of Evil.
Yes. Tell us about some of the events that allowed you to start opening your eyes.
It's really interesting, and I've thought about this a lot because sometimes people will read the book and their immediate reaction, because they have the benefit of my 2020 hindsight, was, well, if I'd seen this, I would have bailed out immediately. Or if I saw that, I would have bailed out. Why were you so stupid to stay with him? How come you put up with this? How come you put up with that? But if you're in the moment, it's really not that easy. There are a lot of good things that are happening in a relationship. If you're in a relationship and you stay in a relationship, you stay in it because there are good things about it. This
Correct.
man made me feel like I was the only woman on the face of the earth when I was with him. Of course, he was making other women feel the same way, but I didn't know that. But I felt so protected, and I felt so valued and so treasured. And I mean, we traveled the world together. We were climbing up a deactivated kind of a volcano just to look down and be able to see it. It was a beautiful day, and you know, I started to tire a little bit. We were on the way down, and it started to get cold and rainy, and he literally picked me up into his arms and he carried me down that mountain. And you don't get any more romantic than that. And so with the red flags that popped up were all these other things surrounding those red flags. And yeah, there were times when, you know, I found that there was another woman earlier on in the relationship, and
Okay.
I forgave him for that because he, you know, said, well, nothing happened, but no, I'll make sure that I don't ever do it again, and please forgive me, and this, that, and the other thing. There were some things that made me suspicious that I, you know, because we had a routine. We were together certain nights, and there were certain nights that we weren't together. I had a business to run. I couldn't be with, you know, focused on that a relationship 24/7. I was okay with that. But you know, every once in a while I change things up. Hey, I got tickets to see jazz bands. Let's go on this night instead of our regular night. And that was always fine with him. So I tested it out.
Right.
But you know, you see these things, and the longer you're in a relationship, the harder it is to break loose because you've invested so much in it, and
So much
there's
time.
actually a psychological term for it. It's called the sunken cost theory. The analogy is that you've bought this beautiful car and that you've polished it and kept it in good shape and put all the whistles and bells on it, and you love that car and you don't want anything to happen to it, and an accident happens and it goes off into the water, and you cannot bear to let it go, and you spend all this time and money and effort trying to resurrect that car out of that lake because you've got so much invested in it, you're not willing to let it go. And then the more time and effort you put in it, the less likely you are to let it go.
So Diane, you didn't suspect anything.
Well, I suspected off and on. Okay, I did suspect off and on. And like I say, I chose to ignore some of those things because I was kind of in, you know, I wasn't 30 years old when all this was going on. I met him when I was 50. So I felt like this was my real last chance at love. This was going to be the last love of my life, and it almost was, but not how I expected.
Right.
You know. But yeah, there were things that I saw that triggered something in me, and I pushed them aside because I didn't want to lose the relationship.
So you had mentioned,
and I think
early. Oh no, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I think a lot of women do that.
Right. So you mentioned earlier, one of the women you warned took the initiative and got tested for all STDs, and that's when she was diagnosed with HIV. And so tell me this much. If that person hadn't come back to you, would you have even thought about being tested for HIV?
It would not have ever occurred to me. When all this was going on, I was approaching 56 years old. When you think about STDs or STIs, you think about teenagers in the backseat of a car. You don't think that it applies to you when you're that age. It just wasn't on my radar in any way, shape, or form. And the other women kind of echoed the same things. And you know, there are no ad campaigns or educational programs for people in that age range to remind them about those things. Yeah, it's been in the news, but it's kind of taken a back seat since the medicines have come out. It's not so critical anymore. So you don't think about that, and neither did any of the doctors that I was seeing. And the other problem was that there are so many things that it can be that have similar symptoms. And so it's almost a last ditch thing. But yeah, if she had not given my name to the health department, and see, that's where we say that we saved each other's lives. Because when I called her originally to tell her about the HPV, she wanted to meet with me. She wanted to have a sit down face to face because she was still seeing him. And it was a little bit of a heart palpitating moment when you're meeting with the woman that's with your ex, right?
Correct.
And she, I told her the whole story, and I, told her, hey, this is just for your information. I'm not suggesting that you break up with him. This is your decision. I'm just giving you a heads up. And she listened very carefully, and she thanked me, and I went my way, and she went hers, and I didn't hear from her until about 3 months later. But if I had not put that idea in her head, she would not have gotten tested, and she would not have known either that she was carrying HIV. And then if I hadn't done that, and then she hadn't called and gotten tested and given my name to the health department and they called me, I would have never gotten tested either. So we both consider that we saved each other's lives. And I hear that from some of the other women too, because if you warn somebody and they do go get tested and they find out that they have acquired HIV, you feel like your life was saved. There were 3 of us, and I was diagnosed too. My disease had progressed to AIDS by the time I was diagnosed, so I was very seriously ill. Which is another reason that it's a little bit amazing that I was out stalking him and going through trash and all kinds of crazy things.
Right.
Put away.
Right. and I was going to say, you and, the sisterhood, you guys didn't stop there. You started contacting others.
We did.
How did you go about tracking down, the former girlfriends?
Well, he was a martial artist too. He had worked for me in my school, and as part of, and he had lost his job. When I started seeing him, he was a network security analyst for EDS, and had a great job, but got laid off. And in the meantime, came to work for me part-time doing some martial arts classes. And so I put him on my cell phone plan, on the family plan, as part of the benefits of being a part of the school, And so because I had access to his cell phone, that's how I caught him the last time, was I looked into his voicemail, and I heard 2 different women with 2 different voices saying, well, I'm sorry I couldn't see you Friday night. And the other one said, oh, yeah, Sunday will be great. This was Saturday when I broke into his voicemail, so I knew he was with somebody that was different than those 2 that night. So
Diane,
precipitated a wild Carson. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Diane, what was this person? I mean, I used the gentleman, but was this person sleeping with someone every night?
I believe that he was. I believe that he was a sex addict. I'm positive that he's a sociopath and a narcissist, but I'm pretty sure that he's a sex addict. Yeah, I don't think that he missed a night. And when I started stalking, and the neighbor that I met that lived in his neighborhood was able to watch his house and write down license tag numbers of the women that were in his driveway overnight. And she would give me the license tag numbers. And I had a friend that worked at an attorney's office, and she had access to DMV. and she would run the tags and give me the address and the name, and I would go and visit the women. I also went through the cell phone records and called every number until I reached people who were seeing him and went and talked to him on the phone or went to visit him.
Wow. Yeah, it's. I got to tell you, I mean, you have a lot of guts, and we have to get into how did you find the courage overall? And you kind of slightly touched upon it about 10, 15 minutes ago. But yeah, how did you find the courage?
Well, first of all, I was really mad. And that has a way of boosting your courage just a little bit. I mean, you know, I'm 7th degree black belt now. I think it's 5th degree when all this happened. But I've been in martial arts for some number of years, and I was not only mad, I was fighting mad. And you know, I was sad, and I was upset, and I was concerned, and etc. But I was also mad. And so when I started thinking about this, I thought, if I had not known about this, I would be dead. And I can't let that happen to any of the other women. I just can't do it. I felt compelled to notify people. And I knew that if we didn't, he would never stop. He actually was court ordered to stop having sex without protection, and had to sign a cease and desist order. And he had a car in the driveway the next night.
Oh my.
So there was nothing that was going to stop him unless it was me.
Right.
And so I really felt like it was up to me to stop him.
So, Diane, I'm at a loss of words because this story is just too much for me to just take in right now, because I'm just, he had a cease and desist, and there was a new car in the driveway that night. So he didn't care.
The next night, he did not care. He did not care. And if you know, and there have been a lot of news stories about him. There's been a couple of interviews recently since the book's come out. He takes no responsibility till this day for his actions.
No remorse.
He takes none. He blames the whole thing on me.
No remorse at all.
Incredibly, no remorse. No.
Okay.
And you know, it was so crystal clear to me, and the way that it happened, the way that I got what the inner Philippe really was. You know, he had this great exterior. He was over 6'2" tall. He had dark curly hair. He was handsome. He was in shape. He was very well mannered, polite, charming, romantic, the whole package. And one of the women had agreed to do a deposition. She wouldn't file charges. She was actually had a religious affiliation that would have gotten her in a whole lot of trouble if anybody had found out. But she did agree to do a deposition. And so when she did the deposition, I took her to the courthouse to do it. And of course, he has a right to face his accusers. And this is before trial. And I had not seen him since the arrest. This is about 2 years, almost 2 years after the arrest. And when I compared who I knew, who I had been with for 4.5 years, to when I saw him in that courtroom, he was in shackles, he turned around, and we made eye contact. It didn't look like the same person. He had dropped from around 200, 205 pounds to, I bet he wasn't more than 155. He was gaunt. He was drawn. His face was skin and bones. And it was like the whole facade had fallen off of him. And I was seeing the true person standing in front of me at that time instead of the one that I had seen all along with the fake part.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. And I'm going to say this respectfully: the blinders were off of you. You saw the person for what they really were after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us, what are you doing now? What is your mission now in life?
Well, that's another one. How much time do you have? Really, the book was written as a cautionary tale to a great degree. Trust your instincts. Look deeper. Don't be conned. And I'm sorry, but anybody can be conned. And it's really interesting to me. And I look at different things in the news, and I see things that happen that are similar to my case. And there are a couple of examples. First of all, Bill Cosby comes to mind, where there was one woman who finally stood up and said, I'm gonna come forward. No more. Right. I'm gonna come forward. And in my case, I believe that I was that woman as well. It just was 10 years earlier than what happened with him. But because the other women were willing to come forward after I had stepped up. But the other thing was, there was a guy, Bernie Madoff, quite some number of years ago, who conned a lot of people out of a lot of money. And I heard not one single solitary media person, not anybody talking in conversation. There was nobody that said, well, those people were stupid for trusting him. Those people were stupid. They should have seen. I could not have done that. I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have trusted that guy. It's their fault. They were stupid. Nobody said that. It was Steven Spielberg. It was Kevin Bacon. It was some high rollers, high level, intelligent, smart people. And they got conned, just like I got conned. But with women, we get blamed.
So true. So true.
So my mission is to make sure that everybody knows that anybody can get conned. It can happen to you. And to be aware of it and take precautions and trust but verify. And the other thing is, I do have a website. It's called datestronger.com, and it is designed to help women or men protect themselves and know how to protect themselves and what to look for, not only physically protecting themselves, but emotionally and sexually protecting themselves in the dating world.
So, oh my goodness, there's so much that we had to cover with your story. I am going to include the song in the post-production of this interview. I do want to mention, if someone, number one, ways to purchase your book.
It's on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble.
Tell us about speaking engagements you have coming up. Tell us about ways to get in contact with you on your website. Everything that you're doing out there socially. How will our listeners get in contact with you?
Well, I have a couple of Facebook pages. There's my author page, which is Diane Reeve. There's the book page, which is Standing Strong. There's also the website, and there's an email address on the website. The website is datestronger.com. And then I have, there's a Twitter account and Instagram, and there's lots of Facebook posts. I do have a blog on WordPress. It's Diane Reeve. And you know, the song is, you mentioned the song, and we haven't talked about that, but it's really another thing that seems to be a God thing to me. I have a young lady who has a lot of talent in the entertainment business, and she has written a song that has been about my story. It's called Unbroken, and I know you're going to play it at the end. So that's available on iTunes. There's a YouTube video that talks about the book a little bit. And of course, Standing Strong can be purchased at Barnes & Noble, online at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and Amazon. And the Kindle version is available also. As far as upcoming things, I am going to be featured again on Oprah's Where Are They Now? I was on Oprah originally when this came out in 2009 after trial. But
Okay.
I have done a little preliminary work with them, and that will air this fall on the Where Are They Now show from Oprah. If you can go back into the archives, Crime Watch Daily did a great little piece back in May on the story, and did an interesting interview with him. So there are some things out there that people can do to look and see, you know, a little bit about the story besides buying the book and getting information through the website.
Diane, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out today to talk about Standing Strong, to talk about your story, to share your story with our listeners. I definitely want to stay in touch with you, because I don't want to get to a point where 5 years from now we go, you know, I'm going through the Rolodex, I'm saying, well, where's Diane Reeve right now? Let me catch up. So I will connect to your, well, I'm already connected to your Twitter account, but I'm going to connect to your other social media accounts and also your website, sign up for newsletters, because I know there's going to be, bundles of information that are going to be available from you and from your team. I want to thank you for taking the time out today. I want to give you a quick round of applause.